Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Wonderful to be here as a tourist. Yeah.
So, this is very exciting. Since last time you were here on this stage, this happened.
Yeah.
It's in every delegate book, so there's 600 copies of this. Each of you will have one. And when I read it back, it reminded me of so many people that we met together at this conferences in DC, conferences around the world. And I guess the first question for me, it's why slavery? Why of all the issues that you encountered, at the CEO of the foundation, this became the issue that effectively, where you put your mark? Why was this?
Well, I guess, I started at the foundation by women's rights. And then women's rights, this conference was called Trust Women at the start, etc. And then moved to many other human rights. And the one that really gripped me completely is slavery, because the idea that you can torture a human being, that you can go to such amount of cruelty with a human being, and then knowing little by little so many survivors. And what I discovered speaking to survivors is their strength is extraordinary. I mean, to escape from hell and then become somebody, because you escape from hell, you are ashamed to death, but really ashamed of yourself. You have no confidence whatsoever. You cannot take a decision. You have been, beaten up to transform, completely dehumanized, and then you recover. And when you recover from very complex PTSD and most of the time in terrible conditions, because of course, when you get out of hell, the states will maybe recognize that you have been a victim of slavery, in which case they will pay for 45 days and take care of you. And after, you are in the goodwill of the NGOs and the others who are going to help you. It's a very, very, very short time for someone which is maybe not in their country, has no legal paper, is afraid of everything because, all these things. So survivors are among the strongest of human beings I have met, and I've met many because I'm not that young. And so I wanted to pay homage to them, and I wanted to shed light on this issue, which I have done since 10 years, and as much as I can. So a book seemed to me, with the words of the survivors, the right thing to do. And it came, like this.
I remember. It didn't take you long. One of the issues that really transpires from the book is this idea of deceiving the trust of people.
Yeah.
How have you seen this playing up in the lives of some of the survivors that you capture in the stories of your book?
So many things. First, you have been betrayed, so much betrayed by someone you have trust. So take the example, because I always prefer to give human examples. So take Marcella Loiza. She's in the book. She was in Colombia. She trusts a man who tells her, I'm going to help you have a fantastic career, international career in dancing. So come with me, I will take you. She finds herself in Tokyo. She's trafficked by the worst mafia and very powerful mafia, Japanese mafia. And so she's totally betrayed by everything. You take Jennifer Campton. She's an American, she's a white American girl, and she falls in love. And she finally falls in love by someone who is madly in love with her. So that's wonderful, And then the guy indeed was grooming her. And so for 8 months, she has been betrayed by the person she loved passionately, to become a slave, a sex slave in that case. So the kind of betrayal that you have, or Dipendra Giri, Sharon was speaking of Qatar. He is trafficked from Nepal to Qatar, and he becomes a slave in Qatar, etc. So all these people have been betrayed completely. And then, even after that, they could I mean, I don't know how, by strength of will, by strength of heart, by strength of everything they have. And I think also, to survive these kind of things, you have to have a sense of compromise also. You have to know how to tell your story, etc. So all of them have overcome that, and all of them have created their own NGO to help people who have fell prey to trafficking. So it's quite remarkable people. But I was also in India, and I was in the ashram of Kailash Satyarthi, the Nobel Prize. And so he has rescued more than 80,000 children from slavery in India. And in this ashram in Rajasthan, you have children who have never known love, more or less. Some of them have been taken at 4, at 5, at 6. And they have been put in conditions of total dehumanization, etc. When they get out of that, they don't even know what is kindness.
There's a story that you always that you mention also, which is quite powerful. Can you tell that story that you witnessed with your own eyes when you went there?
Yeah, I mean, one was 2 children who had been rescued a few weeks before were not speaking to the others. Not when I was there, it was before that. And at some point, for 2 weeks, they refused to speak to anybody. I mean, they were terrified. And after 2 weeks, one ex-slaves also, because they are all ex-slaves, speak to them. And the first word they utter is, "Why are these people so kind with us? Is it that they want our kidneys or our eyes?" They could not even imagine that someone would be kind. I mean, they don't know what it is. So what you have to rebuild after that is immense. And when you see this, so the reason why I got really hooked on slavery and really fought against this crime by all means that we can, was for that, because of their resilience, because they are examples for all of us.
There is another example that I'll always remember, which is touching back on the point of PTSD, so the inability of making decisions when you're being told and forced to do. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So you have been beaten, terrified. So if you are in sex slavery, for instance, you are beaten, you are gang raped all the time, you are, treated as really nobody or worse. And you cannot take any decision, because if you ever try to escape, they are going to get you, and they tell you, "I will kill your family, I will kill your children if you have." And very often, traffickers have a baby with the person they enslave, because it is another hook on a personality, another way to totally submit them. And so when they get out of that, for years, they have not been able to take any decision, because they had to obey. They had to be an obedient machine. And suddenly, I mean, it's Professor Cornelius Catona from the Bamber Foundation, who is a remarkable psychiatrist, who explained once, and he elaborated with me, that when you get out of slavery, and you go, for instance, in Starbucks, and you say, "I want a coffee." And they say, "Oh, would you like it lungo, stretto, ristretto, colate, da-da-da?" No idea. I mean, I have no idea. I want a coffee. And this is the position you have. And, it was very interesting, because one day, speaking with Jason Rezaian, who was taken hostage in Iran, like so many people, and like one of our staff at the foundation, Nazanin. Jason, we meet in a restaurant in New York. The first time we meet after he's freed. And I was sitting with Richard Radcliffe, and Jason arrived. And he tells me, he didn't know me, but he tells me, "Well, choose whatever. I don't care what I eat." And I said, "By any chance, would you have difficulty to take decisions?" And he said, "Yes, how do you know?" And I said, "Well, Catona told me this." And he said, he had spent a few months in isolation, total isolation, could not take a decision. And he said, "I'm in the restaurant and I hear all this noise in my back, And you know, my interrogators in jail were in my back. I could not see them, so I feel very at ease. So it lasts long, long, long. And so this is why they have relapses. This is why, you know, it is so difficult to get out of it. Many of the slaves in the sex industry, because of course not in forced labor, but in the sex industry, have been addicted to drugs. So you have to do all that when you get out. And the tendency when you relapse, what you call relapse in PTSD, which is when you suddenly have a nightmare or you think you recognize someone who looks like your slaver, etc. So you fall in a state of panic, and very often you fall back into addiction because it's the only way to numb your pain.
The story of Jennifer reminds me a little bit of what you're just saying, and that was perhaps one of the most striking survivors that comes across the book. And I remember meeting her in Washington. And what I remember being so strange about the entire episode is that she came across as really a new person, that she was brave and she was courageous. And then obviously she committed suicide. And how does...
No, she overdosed.
She overdosed.
Which is different.
Yeah.
That is to say, it was a night where she had a relapse. And what she did was go to the people she knew in Columbus, Ohio, and take the drug.
So it's this idea that you come out of it and then still...
And it comes back. And she was, you know, she's especially extraordinary because she's a slave for almost 6 years. And then she gets out of it and she's a total wreck when she gets out of it. And 1 year after, she has already created her own NGO, Survivors Inc. So the story of Jennifer is she had an enormous tattoo here and in her back and just over her vagina. And she, with the name of her slavers. So when she got freed, I mean, when she escaped, because in that case she escaped, every time she would look at herself in the mirror, she would see the name of her savior there. So it was back into the nightmare every time. And so one day, she was explaining that to someone in an NGO, and this person told her, look, I give you $200 and go and have something cover your thing. And it was so liberating for her that she created Survivors Inc. And Survivors Inc. is a fantastic NGO, and if anybody in this room wants to help an NGO, help Survivors Inc. in the US, because they really need the funding. What they do, so many slaves in the sex industry are tattooed by their owner. So here, on their forehead, on their legs, on their arms, on their neck, everywhere. So every time you look at it, you are property of someone. It's horrible. So Survivors Inc. help all these people to, but she didn't not only do that, she was going into schools and explaining to children according to their age, because you don't speak the same to someone who is 13 or to someone who is 18. But how the grooming process happens. And she went into details because she thought you have to know it. All teachers should know it. And one day in a school she was speaking, and a girl stood up and said, this is happening to me now. And so she said, you know, I've saved her life. But just by education, you can save so many lives. So she was extraordinary, and she's a great character. But the three of them are great characters, yeah.
Coming back from the panel on supply chain,
yeah,
you've been connecting a lot of people, the CEOs, the NGOs, the survivors, the business leaders, the law firms. What's changed, and what do you think still needs to be changing? I mean, I was very surprised by hearing from Sharon about the kafala system, and if the development takes place, that's huge.
So one of the solutions that I put in my book is we should all ask that the kafala system ends. and finish. The kafala system is a system of sponsorship that exists in many countries. So all the Gulf, Dubai and all around Abu Dhabi, etc., but also Lebanon, also Saudi Arabia, etc., and many other countries. This system is that when they need a lot of workers to come and build their countries, which were very poor, as we know, two generations ago. So they need workers to come, and to make them come, there is a system of sponsorship. That is to say, the employer sponsors the worker, and it gives him the visa to come in the country, and it gives him the visa, the exit visa to leave when he has finished his job. I say he because usually it's mostly men. Millions of Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshi, etc., come to work in the Gulf. And then they arrive, their passports are taken away, they cannot have an exit visa, and so they are in the hands of the employer. And if the employer decides not to pay them, decides to give them dog food, to make them work 18 hours a day under 50 degrees, etc., he can. The guy cannot go, cannot leave, he doesn't have an exit permit. So the kafala system is something which is really dreadful. Qatar, and this is very interesting, and I was glad that Sarah mentioned that, Qatar in the Gulf has been the only country because they have the World Cup in 2022. So they had a lot of media attention on what was going on in Qatar. And what was going on in Qatar is what happened to Dipendra. You are a slave, very often. And so they understood that it was not very good advertising before the World Cup, and worse than that. So they really took action. And this fills me with hope, because what they started to do is to put the problem of slavery at the ministry level. And then they started to say what Sarah was saying, you have to give a minimum wage. You have to, So I don't say slavery is out of Qatar. There are still, a bit everywhere, slavery in Qatar. But it's an enormous progress. And I hope that the example in Qatar, and if, us consumer, us citizens, us, head of businesses, etc., start a campaign to say we have to stop that system, or at least the worst part of this system, this will free millions of slaves in one go. So it's an easy fix. But up until now, only Qatar has done that, not Abu Dhabi, not Dubai, not the others.
Well, if Qatar presses ahead, obviously that would have a massive impact potentially on the rest of the Gulf. So I guess it's to be seen. But you mentioned a very interesting point.
To be seen, and as you know, they are not very friendly with the others just now. So
at the moment, not exactly. But
and maybe it's also a reason why they want to look better.
So you mentioned media and the role that media plays in raising awareness of these issues. The Thomson Reuters Foundation now has the biggest news team covering slavery and trafficking.
Thanks to the CNA Foundation.
Thanks to the CNA Foundation. And it is no longer, and that's in a way the beauty of it, it's no longer an underreported story. I mean, we read stories of slavery and trafficking on the Evening Standard, on the BBC. What do you think can be done at this point then by the media and the other different agents of change in pushing the agenda forward? I mean, we have the Modern Slavery Act. Yes, it needs to be given teeth.
So the Modern Slavery Act or the other acts in France, in Netherlands, in Australia, etc., are very good. They have no teeth. That is to say, you have to say, this is what I do because I'm a company that has more than 30 million pounds turnover every year. This is what I do to clean my supply chain. And if you say, I do very, very little, well, that's fine. You just declared it. So it has no teeth. So you need to give... if I had to answer the question that was asked before on what should happen is that law enforcement and the police, the Met Police in London and the police everywhere, should be given a lot more means to arrest these people and to put them in jail. until it is almost total impunity to enslave someone. Of course the business is growing. I mean, we say it's $150 billion. It's probably a lot more, as we all think. When you just put together the numbers, it's a lot more than.
And the numbers of prosecutions.
Yeah,
absolutely,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And the number of conviction last year in 2018, conviction in the whole world, that is to say people that have effectively gone to jail, 7,000. So 7,000 convictions for 40.3 million slaves officially, probably a lot more. I mean, this is mind-blowing. So the first thing we have to do is to arrest people, put them in jail for a long time, and then, you will stop to see drug smugglers thinking, oh, finally the business of sex trafficking is more profitable. I'll go there. Because, you can resell the woman or the child 30 times a day. It's fantastic.
Deepandra has a story that's connected to this conference.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit the story?
So this was it was the second conference I did. So since the beginning, Trust Women was one day on slavery, one day on women's rights. And the goal was to take action. And we took some very big actions, like the Banks Alliance with Cyrus Vance, like the Stop Slavery Award that is still going on for companies who try to do the right thing, and many things. So at the second conference, so in 2013, we had this man who was a Nepalese who went to Qatar. He was educated. He is a Nepalese who was a teacher. He speaks English, not at the time, not a perfect English, but he spoke, pretty good English. He was a teacher. He had children. He had his first daughter, but he wanted more. So he thought, I need to make money. So he leaves his village, and he finds a job in an office in Qatar. He thinks it's ideal. I will work in an office, paid, da-da-da. Yes, so to do that, you need to take a loan, and this is how starts debt bondage. You take a loan because you paid your flight and you don't have $1, so you take a loan. His interest rate was 60%, excuse me of the small interest rate, and etc. So he goes in Qatar. He stays there 2 years, and after 2 years and a half, he's clever enough to say, I need my holidays, I will take shorter holidays, and I need to go and see my grandmother who is very sick. He has his exit visa, he goes, he never comes back. But he had this huge debt, so he has to repay the debt, which grows all the time because it's 60% interest rate. So he goes back to work in Dubai, and this is where I find him, thanks to an academic. And he was working in Dubai no longer as a slave, but as a small pay. He comes at the conference and he speaks without giving his name because he was afraid that he would be recognized. And he tells his story and even show pictures of where he was sleeping in Qatar, because he had taken a few pictures with the camera of someone else. Bon. Very good. He speaks, and it was a panel with many other ex-slaves, and there is a lady in the room that I didn't know, and after the panel, she comes to see me, and she says, Monique, I want to buy the debt of this guy. Do you think he would accept? I said, well, I guess so.
Sure.
So I saw this extraordinary meeting of the two of them, and I was there. And she didn't know him, and she told him, how much is your debt? And he said, $4 million. And, we were watching each other thinking, my God, probably anyone in the room, $4,000.
No, you mean 4,000.
$4,000, of course, $4,000.
Okay.
And now we speak million and billions.
You expected for million, but it was 4,000.
But it was $4,000, and so she was taken aback. So she told him, "I give you 10,000. Go back direct to your country and do whatever, create whatever business you want to create." So he flew back direct to Nepal and to his family as a free man, refunded his debt, and then created his NGO. So it's it was the first time that I saw you can do something for slavery, for the ones.
And you're still in touch with Dipanjan?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is he doing now? How is he doing?
So he has his NGO. He has started to take data for in Nepal on slavery to help others. So at some point he helped Ben Skinner. He helped others. You know, we put him in contact with many people, and his NGO is just putting awareness on that. But it's in this remote village in Nepal. Yeah.
There's a number of people.
I'm in contact with all of them, you know.
I know. That's why I asked you. There's a number of heroes that you mention in your book. Would you pick just one and tell us why he or she is in that section of the book?
Who?
You mentioned some of your heroes, some of the people that the people that you.
My heroes.
Yes, your heroes.
Well, I think I put first, but this book was finished before she received the Nobel Prize. But the first one I put was Nadia Morad, because Nadia was, so she is this Yazidi woman that you have seen, for the ones who come to this conference, you have seen her, I think, at least once, maybe twice. But she did something extraordinary. She came to, immediately after her enslavement by the Islamic State, she spoke at the Security Council in New York, and she told her story just as it is. And around the table, all these men, because they are mostly men at the Security Council, cried. And Nadia was not crying. She was the only one, without veil, without nothing. She was not crying. And so she became instantaneously a hero for the whole Yazidi population. And I was speaking at a conference in Iraq with Yazidi, the first Yazidi conference ever. 2 months after she was at the Security Council, everybody knew Nadia. She was a hero for all of them to have spoken and put it on the radar. And then now she has the Nobel Prize, so it's fantastic. But you have many other heroes in the book, like a lawyer, like Martina Vandenberg. She's a lawyer. She has spent her life defending people who have been enslaved for forced labor, usually domestic, in the United States, and getting compensation for all the years that they have not been paid. So this is useful. We were speaking of restitution. She does that. She is one of my heroes. Kevin Ireland is one of my heroes too, because he has been at the Met Police. He has done an extraordinary work at the Met Police in London. Then he was the first UK commissioner for slavery. Then you know what? He got very frustrated. He thought UK was not doing enough. He left. That's not bad either.
No, absolutely. It takes courage.
Yeah.
Monique, you're gonna be signing this book. There's a break coming up upstairs, so there's gonna be a table for you to sign these books. Just one last question before we wrap it up. This is the publisher. Interestingly, is a publisher that produces a lot of educational books. So most likely, this book will go into schools or will be read by students.
Yes.
What do you hope is going to be achieving, considering the magnitude of the issue?
I think the more young people will read it, and the better we will be, because first, maybe they will not fall prey into the hands of slavers. And you have people very well educated who fall prey to them, because they take you at your most vulnerable. So you are so vulnerable that you are going to believe the guy who tells you, you are the best woman I've ever met. Or you are going to believe someone who tells you, you should give me your child because I'm going to give him a very good education. Maybe he will work 1 hour or 2, but, Or you are going to believe someone who says, do you want a job? Because you're a migrant, because you were in Myanmar and you are now in Bangladesh and you need to feed your family. You are ready to believe anything. The more we will tell, and this is why this is so important to tell the stories, the full stories. It's in their words. That is to say, it's not me telling their stories. They tell their stories, and through their stories, I tell the real business and all the aspects of that business. But it is so important that young people read it and are aware and will not fall prey if one day they have to migrate. We saw climate change.
Absolutely.
huge perspective of migrations, the millions of people on the move, they fall prey to traffickers all the time.
So let's hope that it goes into the right hands. Also, in not just in countries. We always said this happens everywhere. We're talking about the US, we're talking about the UK. So I hope, hopefully, this will make a difference. Signed copies upstairs. Thank you for returning to the Trust Conference. You're always welcome.
Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you so much.
And may I say, I think it's fantastic, and you have done a great job. So I'm so proud that I taught you one or two things.